Hey, I don't know if I've told you lately, but I am so grateful for the views, for the likes, for the comments, for the support, for the encouragement. Someone recently commented and just said that they had discovered the channel and that they actually ordered some things, and that meant to me that something about what they saw was helpful. And I told Rob I just feel like celebrating that. Just felt incredible, because obviously there's a level of this where you're talking to yourself. But it never feels that way. And genuinely, when I'm doing this, when I'm recording, it feels like I am talking to people. And I think that probably comes from when I was little. I grew up in a household of 6 people. So my mom, my dad, and then I had 3 older siblings. My sister is 8 years older than I am. My brother was 7 years older than I am. My other brother is 6 years older than I am. Growing up, I was just Niecy, little Niecy. And so they were teenagers when I'm 5, 6, 7 years old, really young. And they were out and about and doing what teenagers do, especially in the 70s and early 80s, because nobody was watching, nobody's paying attention. Our generation, right? But I spent, and this is going to sound really sad, and it's not at all. In fact, I mean, I liked it. Not because I didn't want to be near my siblings. I thought they were the bee's knees. But I spent a lot of time alone. We didn't live in a neighborhood. We lived in trailer parks a lot. I've mentioned that if there's anything you learn about me in the first 5 minutes, usually, of knowing me, is that I grew up in a double-wide trailer, and that I have predominantly lived in the South, and so a lot of my stories, a lot of my culture, a lot of my history has a very Southern tinge to it. But regardless of that, what I was thinking about was that when I was young, I spent a lot of time by myself. That when we moved out of the trailer parks and onto 1 acre of land, that was such a breath of fresh air for us. I don't just mean that economically. I mean that my dad was a farmer all of his life until the early 70s, and he longed for farming, but that just wasn't going to be sustainable for a family of 6, not in the 70s. And so having that 1 acre of land meant some sense of space and privacy, but also that he could grow his garden. Our entire, what would have been a backyard for most people in the spring, summer, and fall would end up just being rows and rows of corn and okra and green beans and peas and tomatoes and, all the things. And I loved it. Like, I didn't, let me just be clear. I didn't love going out and doing the, especially the okra. Cutting okra is a painful experience. If you've never done it, just trust me, not something you want to do as a kid. A very highly sensitive kid is at that. But there was just something about that. And it also, I think, helped center me as a kid. I wasn't lonely, but I was very comfortable being alone because we had this acre of land. I enjoyed going outside and just being in nature, just sitting out there. I would sit on our back porch, or I would go those stories that I go, yeah, there it is. There's the ism. That I would go out and I would be fascinated by how ants lived and worked and what they did. And I would just sit and watch them. So when I would go out for my observation time, again, it's a wonder I didn't have a pocket protector and the glasses and all the things, but that's not how I looked. That's not how I dressed, but that was my personality. But I would go out and just observe them, and for, I think, hours at a time, I found contentment in that. I wasn't bored. Again, we were a generation that really didn't have that as an option. I was telling Rob at lunch that I had a dream last night about that we had a pet squirrel. But we don't have a pet squirrel. I haven't had a pet squirrel ever in my life. We've had lots of pets. I said granimals. That's not pet. I was going to say hamsters, and then gerbils were mixing in, and then granimals. We had hamsters, we've had roosters, we've had chickens. On the farm, we had pigs. The obvious fish, the birds, No reptiles. Mm-mm. No reptiles. I had a pet fish that was actually just an overgrown, probably some sort of radioactive minnow, but it was very large. And I named him, this was when I was in my very biblical stage of life, learning books of the Bible, and I named him Matthew John Mark. I guess I just did not like the name Luke. I don't know, but this fish was named Matthew John Mark. I had lots of animals. I've always been drawn to animals. But I was telling Rob about this dream that we had a pet squirrel, and we had left for a few days, and this pet squirrel was not upset but very hungry and was scurrying around and was hanging, sort of just hanging on my finger until I fed him. And the funny thing is Rob asked me what was his name, and I hadn't remembered this, and then all of a sudden I was like, Glenn. His name was Glenn. I have no idea where that came from, or why Rob asked me that, or where that came from. I don't even think I know a Glenn. Certainly as an adult, I don't. But what I deeply remember in that dream was the emotions I felt towards Glenn. And he was this wild animal, clearly, and he depended on me. And we had been gone for a few days and he couldn't get to his food. And I wasn't frantic, but I felt the weight of it. I remember in the dream that sense of, oh, Glenn, I'm so sorry. We did not abandon you. We left and we didn't know you couldn't get to your food. And so I'm processing and I'm problem solving for Glenn in my dream of, okay, so next time when we leave, I've got to make sure he has a container of how he could get to food. I mean, it's a squirrel. He should have some survival skills on his own, you would think. But as I'm reflecting on that today, it makes a lot of sense, and I may get a little emotional, so just, it's already welling up. I can feel it in my face already. My affinity and my connection to animals has been lifelong, and part of that was because they were best friends and they were playmates. And I can remember when we left the farm when we said goodbye to our farm in Georgia. It was 200 acres. And I don't remember that part. I remember lots of things about it, which is really unusual, evidently, because I was 2.5 when we left, and my memories are many before that. But probably the hardest one was the day that we left, and we're standing as a family. And the visual I have in my head is that we are standing in a row, and my parents chose not to take our family dog with us when we moved, because we were moving to the big city of Albany, Georgia, from Blakely, Georgia. And comparatively, it would have been, especially in the 70s, because there were streets and there were neighborhoods, and we were moving into a rental house that was in a neighborhood where there were paved streets and not places where this dog could just roam and be himself. And I remember standing there. Again, I'm barely 2.5, but this memory is so vivid of loss. And it's because the person that we asked to care for him when we left came and took him in front of us. Wasn't trying to be unkind. He just wasn't thinking through young faces and young hearts and how they process loss. Again, this was farmland. These are farm people, and animals are for help. They're not necessarily your best friend. But Buster was beloved by our entire family, and when we would drive up, he would jump up on the car in the car windows, because those cars back then were like tanks. They were huge, and greet us. And I again picture clearly those moments and how that felt every time we would come home. And I remember the excitement. But when I'm standing there as a toddler and watching my beloved friend being taken from us, I am 56 years old, and so 54 years later, I still feel that. Like it was dramatic, and it has left an indelible mark in my heart and in my soul of what that feels like. And he wasn't dying. He just couldn't come with us. And I think there's something terribly strong internally in me about what happens when something is abandoned or is made to feel as though it's been abandoned. And I think, and I'm just processing this right now, so I'm saying it out loud for the first time. I think that's why, long before there were microchips in animals, I'm that person stopping on the side of the road and you see a dog that's malnourished or has the mange or is broken, and thou must find home for it, even if it's not with me. Or when the girls were little and my dad was living with us, and we had a friend who had come to spend the night with the girls, and they were having a great time, and we were laughing because I'm driving my dad's 1991 Lincoln Town Car, think Soprano Mobile. He's in the passenger side with his oxygen tank and all the things. 3 girls in the back seat, 2 are mine and 1 was our friend, and they're little, but they're having the best time. And I'm driving, I'm doing this because that's kind of how that car drove. and I just suddenly had to stop and pull into this. I can see a family of puppies, and they're obviously not being taken care of. I'm sure a stray dog had just had them, and I couldn't not stop. Like, that's what you have to do because they weren't being cared for. So we pull in, I assess the situation, I go back home. We have dog food because, of course, we have a dog, and bring it back and go and purchase puppy food, and just would, every time we were on that way, I would stop and feed them. I called the Humane Society and this and that, but because it was an area that was unincorporated, it's funky how that works in terms of what happens to these animals. I knew enough to know that I was caring for my declining father who had kidney failure. He'd had a massive heart attack, open heart surgery, and then his kidneys had shut down. We don't know if that was chicken or the egg, but he required dialysis in order to stay alive at that point. I had 2 children, 2 small girls. 1 was 2 and 1 was 4. I knew better than to bring an entire litter of puppies home. That much I knew, and we had a dog. So I knew enough to go, okay, I can't solve this problem, but maybe I can help. Telling that very long story just to surmise that this is a pattern, and I'm aware of it. But I'm not ashamed of it. I don't feel bad about it. I would rather lean into the sense of, if the Holy Spirit is tapping on my heart to do something about something, to do so, versus thinking to myself, that's not my problem, or I don't have time for this, or it's just a dog. That's not how I'm wired. Fast forward, it is 2015, and our oldest daughter has decided that for her gotcha day, which, if you're not familiar with adoptive families, some of us call the day that we got our children gotcha day. And she had decided, and we celebrate it like you would a birthday, because that's when we are unified as a family. She had decided that what she wanted to do was to take her friends to the mall, walk around, and they also wanted to go to one of the pet stores that have puppies. We go to this pet store just for the fun, just for the girls to interact with puppies. There's no intent to purchase for lots of reasons, but one of the primary ones is because these designer dogs have designer price tags, and we were not in the market for a dog. At this stage, we had 1 puppy already, didn't need another one. My heart was still broken over a dog that we literally lost. I don't mean she passed away, I mean she was lost, and that nearly took me under. Again, the idea of this dog that I had since she was this big, teeny tiny and wonderful and snuggly, and she was my constant companion, and came home. I had been in the emergency room with our oldest daughter. We get home, and to hear, we can't find her, we can't find Chloe, we have no idea where she is. And we searched and searched and searched the neighborhood, and no sign of her. The wind had opened our front door, and unbeknownst to Rob and Annie, who were home, she had just wandered out. And at that point, she was 11, still intact of all of her faculties, but whether someone saw her, took her home, I pray that's what it was versus what might have been. I don't want to think about anything else, but my hope is that whoever took her did so out of compassion and love and thought maybe she was a lost dog. So we're at the pet store. My heart was pretty closed off to the idea of getting another dog because I had just been so broken over the loss of Chloe. And as the Lord does, all of a sudden, there's this little puppy who is bouncing like this. And I'm going, okay, I see you. What's going on? And I mean, there's puppies everywhere, and people are holding them, and you're loving them, and it's so cute. And the girls are having a blast, and I'm loving it because, again, I mean, who doesn't love puppies? But there was not one thought in my mind of taking any of these dogs home for lots of reasons. And I'm holding this dog, and I'm starting to think, like, you're not a puppy. Like, you seem like big for, because most puppies, and these are the tinier breeds, these aren't like golden retrievers, and there were some, but not what I'm holding. I'm like, I'm scratching my head because we're in a pet store. So I asked one of the employees, I was like, how old is this puppy? Because she seems different, like she's in a little calmer, not in the same like puppy frenzy, but just more like, hey, you, pick me up. And he said, oh, she's 18 months old. I was like, how does that work? How do you have the dog here that long? And he goes, oh, no. They brought her back. They returned her. I didn't know that was a thing in pet stores, but evidently it is. And I said, why? And he said, well, they found out that their daughter was allergic to her, and so they had to bring her and returned her. And I was like, oh, so I was kind of toast after that. And then it didn't settle well with me. Not out of judgment for the people whose daughter was allergic. I get allergies. We have allergies in our family. But out of what must have been going through this 18-month-old dog's mind, and to be back in the place where she has no idea where her family is and feeling that sense of abandonment. So, but I'm trying to be very logical. I'm trying not to give in to my impulses and emotions. And I simply say, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. And the other hard part is she looked almost identical, and I'll show you what I mean, to the puppy that we lost. So that was making things 10 times worse, let me tell you. my strength to say no to things at that point was deteriorating rapidly. But I am responsible. I'm a responsible adult. I have 2 children who are now preteens and teenagers, or a teenager and a preteen, and we already have a dog. And I call Rob, and I'm like, I don't know what to do with what I'm feeling. I am being logical. I know that we do not need a dog, but I need you to at least come see this dog because she looks just like Chloe. And I don't know how to, and Chloe was not a normal looking dog. So that was what was so strange. And I had not seen another dog like this since then. And my husband sweetly says, if I come see that dog, you know we're bringing her home. And I'm like, no, not necessarily. No, that's not why I'm saying that. I just need a second adult opinion of help me just get through this feeling, basically, because I was looking for a way out. I'm like, I don't want another dog. I don't want to fall in love again. I mean, we have a dog. It's Annie's dog, and she loved her. Her name was Lily, and that's great. And we love Lily. I don't want to feel what I had felt, because I knew dogs don't live forever, and my heart was just still really tender to what had happened to Chloe. I tell the girls, I'm like, we're gonna go meet Rob for dinner, because all of her friends were with us, and they're fully aware at this point, like, oh my gosh, we're gonna get a dog. I'm like, no, we're not. We're not having that. We're not. And I'm trying to nip it all in the bud, but you've got girls and their enthusiasm and all that. But I'm sort of hardcore, which is really unusual for me when it comes to things like this. But I was hardcore and going, no, if it's meant to be, we're gonna go. We're gonna, give it 24 hours. And if she's still here tomorrow, then we'll see, and we'll pray about it and see what the Lord has. Because I just could not impulsively rescue. I was trying hard to understand the difference between that impulse to save and rescue and what we need as a family. And trying to model that for my girls, obviously. Anyway, we have dinner with Rob, and all the girls are now going, "You should have seen this puppy, Miss Denise, and she's so cute." And so it's not helping at all. And Annie, of course, was going, "Mom, you know we're going to get that puppy, right?" And I'm like, nope, that is not a done deal. So we go back to the pet store because at this point, Rob is like, we got to see it. I got to see this puppy. But if I see her, that's going to be it, just as he had said before. And I was like, I don't know that for sure. I am not making that prediction. We go back and she's still there. And she has stolen my heart beyond comprehension. And I just melted. And I knew. I knew that she needed me as much as I needed her. And so we asked, what does a returned puppy cost in a place like this? And they gave a very, not a huge price, and Rob negotiated them down, and basically just to cover what they had spent on immunizations and all of that for her, because we didn't want to contribute to any of the stuff that comes with a lot of those kinds of situations. And we took her home. Sorry, it's probably obvious. I'm so emotional about it. And that sweet, rotten, spicy little puppy ended up being one of the best things that we ever did, bringing her home, asking her to be a part of our family. 3 weeks ago, at the age of 13, we discovered that she had a tumor, an inoperable tumor on her spleen. And she had been showing signs of distress for quite a while in different ways, but she was so spunky, perky, because she was so full of life. She would just have bouts of not doing well, and then she would kind of perk up. And when we discovered the tumor, or our veterinarian discovered the tumor after we took her in because she had been not well, we thought we had anywhere from a month to 6 months. We just really didn't know, and he didn't know because we didn't want to do more exploratory surgeries and things like that because it was obvious, and she was 13. But even for little dogs, 13 is a pretty healthy lifespan. And I'm having a hard time telling you her name because if I say her name, it sort of... when we adopted her, 3 years prior to that, my word for the year for 2012 was restitution. And it was the year that we lost Chloe. And I can remember thinking, well, that's awesome, Lord. You give me a word that means that the enemy has to give back twice what it's stolen, and yet you've taken something else. And it took me a minute before I realized it wasn't the Lord that took Chloe. The enemy of this world called death took Chloe one way or the other, whether she went to someone's home and then eventually died. But for me, it was a death because I wouldn't be with her in her final hours. And I have always been with our animals in their final hour. And it's been my honor to do so the same way I was with my parents in the moments that they took their last breath. And I felt angry because that privilege had been stolen from me. But I was able to process through, and I held on to that word restitution, restitution, restitution. And we were in a season by 2015 where I could feel restitution. I could feel it. I could feel that things were being given back what had been taken in those locust years. That Scripture talks about that, where that the locust will come and eat, just ravenously take away what the farmer has sown. And then the Lord will give back after that in seasons. And we were 2.5 years-ish, probably, as I sit here, I go, we were probably 18 months into our restitution season. And I could think of no better name for this restitution dog than to call her Restitution, which would be really hard to say, like if you're calling, come here, Restitution. So we called her Resi instead, which was short for restitution. And she so was. She was this, sounds so cliche to say, but she was so this ray of sunshine, this very bossy, but incredibly confident, sure of herself. She was the alpha for every dog we've had since her. Like when she came into our home and we had a dog already, this little sweet dog Lily was incredibly passive and was always going to be beta to anyone, but certainly to Resi. And Resi was smaller than she was, but Resi did not care. She had that Shih Tzu personality for sure. But she was never mean. That wasn't it. She just didn't take anything off of anybody, which I really liked. I'm like, I always want to be, I've said it out loud, I want to be Resi when I grow up. And she was so cute that it really didn't matter what she did. She was going to get what she wanted. And I can remember someone, I'm sure their intentions were good, but they would try to tell me, listen, you just need to let her know who's boss. You need to be the alpha. And we looked around and we're like, have you met her? Like, I know dogs. I am a studier of the animals. I understand. Resi is her own alpha. She will never be beta to anyone. Everyone is but minions in her world. She gave back so much. You didn't care. And she was so cute. You didn't care. Like, and when I say she was bossy, it was like when she was hungry, you were not going to ignore her. You were going to get up and get her food. If she was thirsty and her bowl was dry, or in her case, if the water was not suitable, that was in her head. Whatever suitability was, we had not met those standards that day. And so therefore the water that was in there, unsatisfactory. You need to now wash it out, clean it, and get me fresh water. So that's what I mean. Like she would, in the classification of women, she would be probably called a diva or high maintenance. But what I saw in her and what I felt in her was like, no, she was a woman who knew what she wanted. And if she couldn't physically get it for herself, because obviously she couldn't, then you were going to be employed to help her. She was not going to just ignore her own needs and wants. She would stand up for herself. She would advocate for herself like crazy. If you had something that she was like, tell me about this cheese that you have, she's going to let you know. She's going to bounce on your leg until she's persistent enough, until you're like, okay. But at the same time, she loved at as deep a level as she bossed. I don't know how to better explain it. So for 11.5 years, Resi was our constant. She defined parts of our daughter's childhood. She was there. At one point, my oldest daughter said, I think you have more photos and videos of her than you do of us. And I was like, yeah, I think you're right. Because we all did it. Like, she would just do the cutest little things, and you had to video it, and you had to record it, and you had to take a photo of it. And that is how you treat someone that you love. And as I've said before to friends, that Resi was not like a child to me. I mean, I've had animals that feel that way because they're very dependent in their personality. She was way too independent in that way to me. Like, again, she was the CEO of a company, and I felt like, and I don't mean this heretically, I mean this tongue-in-cheek, that Resi was like my sister wife. Like, in her mind, she believed that she and I ran this household, especially when the girls were younger. She would defer to me. She would be submissive to me in the ways that dogs are supposed to. So if I opened a door, she would wait for me to go first. I Might also have been that sense of like, if there's something in there, it's gonna get you first. But if I walked, she wouldn't walk ahead of me. She would walk beside me. And I didn't have to teach her that necessarily. Like, that was just a knowing that, hey, this is our role in the family. But she was not subservient necessarily to anyone. But she did understand that we, again, all I can explain is that I think she thought we were both in charge of day-to-day life. She was very good at her job, and she made you feel like that you were her best friend. You were her person. And that was each person in the household, except for Rob. There is a story that cracks me up. I was away. Rob was driving in our driveway in my car. And he drives up and she's outside. I'm sure somebody was out there with her, but she sees him and sees the car, and her little tail is just whacking. She's so excited. And as he gets closer, he pulls up close and he's like, oh, Rezzie's so excited to see me. He opens the driver's side car door like this. Rezzie's going towards him and then stops in her tracks. He said she pulls back, realizes it's him, kind of cocks her head and goes, turns around and walks away. She's like, you are not the one I was looking for. I'm moving on. So poor Rob. I felt so bad for him, but I mean, she loved him, but there was a ranking. Let's just be fair. So why am I telling you all of that about Rezzy? It's because she was such a significant part of our lives, and she has been a catastrophically significant loss in our lives. And honestly, I just couldn't bring myself to talk about it yet. I've talked about it with people in person who knew, but not very many. And I'm just so familiar with death now and so familiar with grief. I want to honor the process of grief, even for my little dog that lived a lovely life. She had the best of the best at all times, mostly because she demanded and required it. But at the same time, it's a lot. It's a lot on top of a lot. I don't know how many of you have had the incredibly weighty responsibility of having to make that decision of when is the time to end their suffering. But it is never easy. And the day that it became very, very clear, I did something with Rezzy. You can think what you like, that's okay, about what I'm about to say. I did something with Rezzy that I did with my dad and with my mom, but not in the same way, because my mom's decline was more rapid than we were prepared for. But with my dad, he had had a massive heart attack. He had had open heart surgery. His kidneys had failed and had to have dialysis 3 times a week. And there just came a day where I knew that he was not at a place that he was going to make it. That had been our hope and our desire, that he was going to recover to a place where he could live well into his 90s under our care, but his body was tired. And because my dad required dialysis, that means at a certain point you have to make a decision. You have to make a decision of, do you continue taking someone into dialysis to keep them alive? Or do you make a decision to stop that and let their body take its natural progression? He was already on hospice, so this wasn't like it. I don't mean to make it sound as though we made a decision to end his life. We did not. His life was ending, and the hospice caregivers were helping me process what that looked like. But at the end of the day, it was on my shoulders to decide, which day is it that I say this will be the beginning of the very end. Because eventually with dialysis, it was getting to where it was helping less and less because his body was shutting down. But when you are the one who gathers him up and drives him to his appointment so that his blood can be cleaned and filtered and all the toxins that build up from the kidneys and everywhere else can be filtered, and he can have a more clear mind, a more restful ability to breathe and to rest. But that became harder and harder for his body to do. I will never forget a phone call that I had with one of the nurses, and she asked me if I had given thought to when we would end dialysis for him. And I just remember thinking, how does one make that decision? Like, what are you talking about? Like, that means I'm making a decision that it's over. And I think there's something in that stirs up those feelings of leaving Buster, the dog from the farm, behind. Of saying, this is over. This whole life you've known, it's over. We have to move on, and you have to go move on as well. We can't be together ever again. Once we knew that this was an inevitable decision I was going to have to make, I asked him in the best way I knew how, as we prayed together, as he was declining physically and mentally. But I asked him for his help. I said, Daddy, I need you to tell me when you're ready to go home. I had put pictures all in his room of his mom, his dad, his brothers, his sisters, everyone that he had had to say goodbye to who were now in heaven, as sort of a welcoming party visually for him, so that he didn't feel, I didn't want him to feel scared and alone. I think I probably didn't want him to feel whatever I thought Buster was feeling, that as he was going to leave one family, I wanted my dad to remember the family that was waiting on him. If I had an actual picture of Jesus, I would have that too. But since we don't actually know what he looked like, my daddy knew Jesus, so I knew that he would be okay. And I will never forget. I mean, obviously, these are not things that one forgets, but I was sitting by his bedside one day, and he just said to me, I think it was one of the mornings that we needed to get ready so I could take him to dialysis. And he just looked at me and he goes, I don't think I want to go today. I want to go home. And I nodded my head and I said, okay, Daddy, okay. I will help you. And so I did. Not that exact day, but that meant I knew that he was tired. And it began the process of his transition. And so when I say I'm familiar with death and I'm familiar with grief, I mean it at a very up close and personal, just like so many other people. You know what it feels like. And I know what it's like to lose someone instantaneously. My brother took his own life, and so there wasn't a transition. There was just an announcement, a phone call. So I get all that. And so with Resi, who I'm fully aware is not my dad, not my mom, not that kind of family member, but was a deeply integral part of our family that we had adopted in, that we had brought in so that she would no longer feel abandoned. And on the day that we knew, and I had been asking Resi, please tell me please help me, because I can't make this decision. I can't. I need you to tell me when you're ready to go. And the morning that she became very ill and all the physical symptoms were there, I thanked her, because there was no doubt at that point that it was time. I swear I'm going to be labeled as the Weepy Vlogger, just like Jeremiah in the Bible. Weepy prophet. Well, I'm the Weepy Vlogger. I really do try to keep composure, but it's just these things are too tender on my heart, and this is who I am. When it was time, Annie and I especially, because we were the only two home with her physically, and we prayed and we cried and we prayed and we cried, and included Rob and Ellie and Madison in our processing of it. So when it was my dad's final hour, all our family was gathered around his bedside, which was in my home. It was a guest room in my home. I held his hand because there was something visually important. I mean, I wanted to hold my daddy's hand all the time, even as an adult. We would walk hand in hand sweetly, like I did when I was a little girl. But I held his hand because I wanted that feeling of handing him over to Jesus, and not just, here you go. I literally wanted to entrust him to my Savior, to his Savior. And so when we were in the room with Resi, and they medically do what they need to do, and the veterinarian said, do you want to hold her while this is happening? And I first looked at Annie and said, I don't want to take that away from you if you want that. And we were all a mess, and so she just shook her head and she's like, no, you can do that. And so I did. I held her in my arms. And I get that somebody watching this is probably going to go, this is really dramatic over a dog. Yep, it is. It is, because this is what grief looks like. It's messy. It's dramatic. It's because we're not supposed to be able to process grief. We weren't meant to die. We were meant to live forever with the Lord in a garden, but that's not how it went. That's not how the world as we know it came about. And since then, death has been a part of that, and it still, every time, feels horrific. And so I held Resi in my arms, and I have to say, I was shocked at how emotional I was. I'm pretty, I know it's hard to believe as I sit here snotting and slobbering and wailing, but in those situations, I'm usually pretty composed. I'm business at hand and making sure my brain quickly goes to, I don't want to over upset whoever else is feeling this. Even when my mom passed or my dad passed, at the moment of their passing, I wasn't hysterical. I was at peace. Not that I wanted them to go by any stretch of the imagination, but I knew it just was, it was orderly. It was, this is how it has to be. With Resi, I think after years and years of that kind of stoicism and pushing emotions down, because you just need to do what needs to be done for lots of painful, grief-worthy things, it was like a dam broke. And I mean that in all sense of that word. Every spelling you can think of. I could not contain what was almost gutturally coming out. I longed for her not to leave me. All the while knowing in my mind, this is natural, this is life, this is death, that go hand in hand is what you signed up for when you adopted her at 18 months old. You know, dogs don't live as long as people, they don't live forever. But there was just something so definite in that moment with her. And again, I'm fully aware it's colored and mingled with so many things that we have experienced over the last several years, and the losses, and the place where I am in my own healing journey of not trying to suppress, not pushing things down, allowing grief to have its day. But I was surprised at where and when my body decided to release its grief there, because I fully expected, that night and the next day, but not at the moment of her death. And yet it was not going to wait. It it was like Resi herself. It was like, oh no, 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 no. Oh no, 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 no. You're gonna feel this now. You're gonna release this now. And I couldn't control it as much as I tried. And I guess I'm sharing this very long story. I don't know if this sounds arrogant to say, so I apologize in advance if it does, but I want to grant someone permission to grieve. If you know me, another thing you know about me is that I'm drawn to a lot of British cultural things, and that sense of stay calm and carry on was not an American ideal, but it is somehow deeply embedded in here. And I'm living in days where I want the peace of the Lord, and I have that. But I don't think I have to stay calm and carry on in the same way anymore. I can feel and release what's happening. I can discuss and be in touch with all of that. I can sit back and go, I don't think I like that. I don't think I'm going to do that. I don't think that's okay. All of that I may have carried internally for such a long time, there's nothing in me anymore that will allow the weight of it. I want to be able to say to anyone, even if it's one person, it's okay to grieve. It's okay to feel what you feel. I want you to have the permission to know loss is deeply altering. It will alter you. And if that's a cat, if that's your hamster, if that's your turtle, if that's your fish named Matthew John Mark, if that's your Chloe, if that's your Lily, if that's your Resi, it's still hard to say out loud. If it's your mom, if it's your daddy, if it's your deeply troubled brother, if it's fill in the blank, you have a right to feel that. You have a right to let that emotion out and not try to suppress it, and not try to be logical and think I got to do the right next thing, because sometimes the right next thing is falling apart, especially if you know where you fall is into the hands of your Father. And that's what I was feeling that day with Resi. There were no comprehensible words. There was just longing that was being tortured, is what it felt like. And the loss of her, and knowing that in those moments she doesn't understand what's happening. And unfortunately I did, and I knew within seconds she would be gone and our lives would be forever altered. So on that note, I hope you all have a wonderful week. I want to share the good and the bad and the painful appropriately. And this has been something that has been deeply painful. in my position in life, I think it's good for me to say out loud, yeah, it's been a pretty crappy season. Overall, it is always undergirded by God's grace, His kindness, the love of His people, the way they surround us, the way they love us. I'm not lacking for care. I've just lost a lot. That some of it is natural loss. Other things I've just lost. So I'm going to end this here, and I don't have any idea which video this is going to go in or what's coming next or what came before it. So I do pray that it's not so Debbie Downer. I pray that it somehow reaches and touches something that you may be dealing with, going through. Again, that would be the point of all this. It's very therapeutic for me, but it's also can be self-indulgent that way. And I can just hear Simon Cowell in my head on American Idol saying, oh, well, that was self-indulgent. When they would sing these songs that nobody else wanted to hear. This may be one of the songs nobody wanted to hear today, but I don't think that's true. I think enough of us go through enough simultaneously because we live on this earth and we are human beings, and loss is a normal part, unfortunately, of life here on this planet. I wanted and needed to share it, and I feel sure there's going to be someone who thinks that was a lot about a dog. You're right, it is. But she was a lot to us. And there's just so many things that I filmed in a beautiful season when there was like joy and all that I want to share that. And so there will be lots of Resi yet to come, but eventually that will taper off because she isn't here. Yeah. Anyway, love y'all. Talk to you soon. Bye.